to talk about search and discovery, which could sound like a dry topic, but it's one of the most fascinating areas of the industry at the moment, it feels like. And I'm going to start by telling you how I discovered music at my crucial music age of 18, the age when you're falling in love with bands and music, which is also going to reveal just how old I am. So when I was 18, music discovery for me meant taping songs off the radio, complete with like 2 or 3 seconds of the DJ introducing it or introducing the next thing. It meant queuing up for a listening post in HMV in Norwich and listening to an album on CD before buying it, and kind of elbowing people who were trying to get on their headphones before I'd finished. And I remember buying print magazines like The Enemy and Melody Maker and Select, which sometimes had a cassette on the cover or a flexible vinyl disc, and taking it home. So I was 18 in 1995, if you were trying to work this out. So it was 4 years before Napster, 6 years before iTunes, 8 years before MySpace, and 13 years before Spotify launched. So I feel genuinely old a lot of the time now. A younger colleague recently told me that she had tickets to see Bugsy Malone that night in London. And I said, "Oh, that's great, I love that film. Is it now a theatre thing? That's brilliant." And she was like, "Bugsy Malone, the rapper, Stu." So if I say Bugsy Malone, who thinks rapper in the room? Put your hand up if you think rapper. Put your hand up if you think children firing custard pie guns. That's culture changing. And when I went home and I told this anecdote, my 10-year-old son looked up from his device and went, "Oh, Bugsy Malone, he's good. Yeah, he's on my playlist." Yeah. "Why are you listening to him?" So that's how I discovered Bugsy Malone. So anyway, we are going to talk about this, and I'm going to buck the trend of getting older and thinking everything's shit now and it was better when you were young, because actually music discovery is amazing now. Whether you're listening to an algorithmically generated playlist or discovering a new band on one of any digital platforms we talk about, or whether you're talking to Alexa to get new music. There's all kinds of ways of finding music, and we're going to talk about what it means in a good way and also in some of the challenges for artists and labels. And I'm going to try and drill down. So we're going to talk about noise first, so noise and clutter. We're going to talk about playlists, and we're going to talk about smart speakers and voice, if we get to that, and then we're going to have Q&A. So what I wanted to do to start was to have everyone on the panel introduce themselves quickly, say who they are, where they're from, but also talk about music discovery, something about how they discover music and how it's changed for them. So I'm so sorry, I'm going to pick on you, Tom, because you're at the end. So who are you, and talk about your music discovery.
I'm Tom, I'm from Motive Unknown. Some of you might know Darren, who's been here for the last couple of years, but he sent me this year because,
last year nearly killed him.
Didn't go very well last year. Never again.
You saw that panel.
So Motive Unknown's we call it a strategic digital marketing company, which is just a fancy way of saying we work with artists and music companies, but not on a kind of campaign basis, more on working with them across their whole business, because that's the way we kind of see things have to work these days. We're not working on an album campaign. We work with someone like Run the Jewels or Underworld or Moby on everything they do. Live, merch, the music, discovery, everything. We work with Run the Jewels, all those people I mentioned, and also music companies like Cobalt and BMG and Domino, kind of advising them and helping them with their digital strategy. And before that, with relevance to this panel, I guess I spent like 8 years at a management company. We were managing a lot of Scandinavian artists like Robin, The Knife, Fever A, Röyksopp, at a really interesting time, basically before Spotify, into Spotify, and then basically up to the point where Spotify was like the dominant platform in those countries. So it was interesting to see that kind of like mini kind of test bed, how that kind of grew with those artists. So that's my background.
Cool. And Quentin.
Oh,
Discovery. Sorry, yes, the other question. So what's exciting for you about how you discover music, or what's changed?
To be honest, I don't think much has changed with the way that I actually discover music. It's just everything is instantly accessible, so it just speeds up the whole process, I guess. So, I still kind of try and take things from lots of different sources rather than just relying on one source. But then it's just everything's so instantly accessible that I've always been a massive fan of Last.fm. Like, I used to use that religiously back in the day. So the whole AI music thing isn't particularly new, but I guess it used to work on a more artist by artist basis, and I think that's still how I use the kind of AI discovery now, is more of an artist by artist, discover an artist rather than just playlists.
Well, Quentin, so you kind of have almost a couple of hats you've had on, because you make music, but you've also worked for labels. But talk about yourself, I guess, and how your discovery works.
Yeah, true. I used to be a full-time DJ producer, and then I want to explore the business part more. So I started working for Armada, doing marketing. And now I recently made the switch to STMPD Records, Martin Garrix's label. And for me, finding new music is now mostly through the algorithmic playlists of Spotify, like Discover Weekly and Release Radar. I used to be like the ID hunter, always search for IDs in sets from DJs, like on 1001 track list. But I think the algorithmic playlists are doing a great job. So it's a great way for me to find new music.
I think the band I fell in love with 2 years ago was called the Serotones, which was just top of my Discover Weekly one week. And I had no idea who they were, no context at all. And then it was just this song that maybe stopped dead in my tracks in the middle of a field and listened to it 3 times and go, who is this? Where have they been? So it can be a wonderful thing. Sammy, explain who you are, why you're here, and
Hi.
how you discover weed.
I'm Sammy Andrews. I'm CEO of Deviate Digital, but also previously label, also previously live promoter. Weirdly, worked Robin's first release and worked Roixop and did a release with Armada a couple of weeks ago.
Nice.
We're all tied in here in some weird way. But now we do digital marketing strategy and advisory to the music industry, both large companies and on a case-by-case label and artist level. And discovery, for me, loads of different ways, but I think the algorithmic stuff for sure, but more recently, for things like the Discover Weekly and Release Radar, I mean, the Spotify is smashing it with that, and a lot of the time that the recommendations are genuinely brilliant, but also now when I find a track in there, sometimes I deliberately go onto the radio for it. So it's sort of, that's the opening door in finding a track, but I found loads of brilliant stuff, just through allowing it to talk me through other things within that genre, so definitely that. But you're not as old as you think. I also used to take things off the radio. I ruined so many of my dad's cassettes. He hated me.
It's like whenever someone of our age starts talking about this, people just go, oh, Grandad, you've told us this story before, but I used to take things off the radio. I worry it's becoming anecdotes. But cool. No, that idea of, I mean, I think the one thing we would acknowledge is everyone in this room probably is a music fan, and we do have that urge to explore. When we discover something new, we go and find out about them. And that's one of the things we might discuss later, is that not everyone has that gene, but we certainly all have that in us. So, right. Luke.
Hi. So I'm Luke Ireland from what was Gracenote, now is Gracenote O'Neilson Company. So a little bit of a change for us. I look after our music business from the data side in Europe, Middle East, and Latin America. So my history prior to that was in live sound, so flogging sound systems to festival festival organisers. Obviously, I work for a company that creates algorithm data-based playlists, so of course I only use our own services internally. But I do also have there's a team of 30 musicologists based out of Amsterdam, and we have quite an active internal discussion about music, so I get a lot of trendy kids telling me about new music. Didn't tell me about Bugsy Malone, though.
Now I know all about Bugsy Malone, because I have to. I keep credibility with my kids. Well, thank you. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was noise, because this came up yesterday a few times, this idea of clutter and noise. And I checked this stat out recently, and I double-checked it. I think 20,000 new tracks are added to Spotify every single day. And I actually checked that out with them and said, do you mean week? And they were like, no, every day, 20,000 new ones. And at the same time, there was Alex's great presentation yesterday talking about the clutter we face in our lives, social media, things coming at us in all directions. And as an artist, you're faced with trying to cut through that and trying to reach people to have one listen, let alone then make them care about you. So, open question, what are the challenges for art? How can artists find their way through that noise, and what are the kind of encouraging things that can help them?
So, when we look at some of the discovery things, and I'm going to talk specifically about Spotify here, but things like the Release Radar and Discover Weekly actually potentially have far more impact than things like the New Music Friday, which when you're sat in a marketing meeting, a lot of people want New Music Friday. But in releasing and encouraging your fan base to follow you, and it sounds like such a simple thing, but we all say it, but it's in order for those alerts to work, you need to have that interaction with the fan base. So artists, at the very least, need to be encouraging their fan base to follow them everywhere, so that those things can kick in, so that the algorithms can kick in. Because there's a million, well not a million, 20,000 tracks released every day. So, and if you haven't got that foot up in the way in already in that connection, then you're not going to be able to tap into those algorithms properly.
I guess as well, I mean, we talk a lot about marketing on Spotify, how can we kind of maximize our presence on Spotify and everything, but at a kind of fundamental level, when it comes to marketing, I guess not much has really changed in 10 years maybe. I guess, you know, you substitute Spotify playlists for radio playlists, and you could be talking about the same meeting, you know, years ago. It's just, there's always going to be that kind of level of quite inaccessible promotion, I guess, that that is really nice to get, and you should definitely work towards, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't kind of look for opportunities everywhere you can and just kind of maximize your chances of being discovered in every place where you can be. And that all kind of goes, again, towards boosting the likelihood that you'll be picked up by these algorithms. You know, you can't rely on editorial placement in these platforms. You have to look for opportunities everywhere you can, and just double down on everything, any positive thing that happens, and that will feed that whole machine, I guess.
And still aligning to what Tom's saying, traditional media to some degree plays a big part in that still. So, and now a lot of the tastemakers may have the equivalent of playlists, but certainly a lot of curators are looking to blogs and certain media outlets for guidance for what the tracks that they're putting in their playlist. So that does still play a huge part in impacting what goes onto a playlist.
And things like Spotify, they part of their AI system is they scrape the web for mentions of things as well. So it's not a completely closed system. And I guess my hope is that when other players come into it in a bigger way, you know, maybe the likes of Facebook, and if Google step up their game, they have access to such a huge amount of information about us that isn't in this closed system, that could be really interesting to add to the mix of discovery. You know, instead of relying on your play history and, like, you know, aligning you with other people with similar tastes, if you could scrape the web for everything, you know, all the kind of cultural context around an artist, which Google has, you know, it has all that kind of structured data available. So if you can combine that along with the play, you know, the listening habits on the system, you know, plus throw in all the Google, all the YouTube information they've got, that could be another really interesting thing. But again, it's just the same thing. It's just always comes back to, like, you just need to be active in lots of different places. You can't just rely on one thing that's going to get you discovered. You need to kind of put the groundwork in all these different areas, and which is why it's great having talks by people like Joe, who was talking about the gaming. It's like there's another opportunity there. It's just a band like Run the Jewels, where they've struggled with services like Spotify because the music's not exactly geared towards Spotify. It's a bit too kind of...
It's not coffee house acoustic playlist.
Not, no. It's a bit in your face. So they've just, you know, it's like, okay, well, what other avenues are there for us? You know, let's work with gaming companies. Let's, you know, they get a sync on a game, but then they kind of go to town on that and become downloadable characters and work with them and do loads of stuff. So there's a million opportunities out there. It's not just about, you know, getting your track placed on Spotify, just like it wasn't about getting on a radio playlist back in the day.
Mention of blogs is interesting. So that you mentioned scraping blogs. So Spotify's Fresh Finds playlist, is everyone aware of that side of things, where they go out, they scrape all the music blogs for stuff that's cool, and then this playlist is created because of it, and it bubbles up. And that idea of, I talked to a PR recently who was saying, actually, it's worth us doing lots of blog interviews. The key is we need to work out which blogs Spotify is scraping, and then we'll go and talk to them. And the blogs, I think some bloggers are a bit like, hang on a minute, you're scraping our stuff to use your playlist, and you're not giving us any money at all, and we're not making any money. It's a bit dodgy. But it is interesting, the idea of it makes a reason to go and do interviews with blogs that might get you into an argument. I mean, Quentin, you're working in the dance music world. Mm-hmm. I mean, in that world, if you're on Armada or Stamp Records, is that one of the ways you can cut through? Because those record labels are trusted brands in themselves. Is that kind of a way of kind of breaking through and saying, well, it's on this label, we trust that?
On one hand, yes, but I think one of the big advantages is that these kind of labels have their own established playlists already. So if you have your own playlist curated, and I think this is a way to collect followers within the genre you're releasing music. So when you release a new track, the chances are high that these followers will like the music, and I think this is a way to trigger the Discover Weekly and Release Radar algorithms, because these people are more likely to like the track, save the track, add it to your own playlist, and yeah, because all these followers are within a certain genre. I think this is a way the system detects I think it helps with the algorithms. And also because there's more manpower, you can also look into the third-party curated playlists. I think this thing is a little bit underestimated, but I saw a lot of examples where some kind of unknown artist got millions of streams just by pitching it to third-party curated playlists. So, and the bigger labels have the how do you say it? They can.
That's a really sore point with me.
They can do
that. The indies still don't have their own playlist brand.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because we're all trying to reverse engineer algorithms now, aren't we? We're all trying to figure out what triggers that algorithm over there. Is it being on that playlist? Is it doing this thing? Is it on that blog? In a way that music industry, maybe this is the future search and discovery, we have to learn to understand the algorithms that are putting our stuff in front of people.
And other industries have been doing this for years. Like there's a whole massive industry around search engine optimization for e-commerce and things like that, and that's just, that's what they've been doing for a long time. Like how picking apart the Google search algorithms and how can you kind of work that to your advantage and optimize your presence there so that it works in your favor.
The things I mentioned, Armada specifically, just we mentioned them, so we just did a release with them, and interestingly, they as a label do have a lot of their own playlists, but they, with nearly every track they release, with the artists they're working with, do pre-save and follow campaigns for the label playlists through the artists. So they pick up, and it's smart 'cause it's genre specific, so it works for all of the artists on the label, but they deliberately do save to library and follow campaigns through their artist channels, which then benefit the label and then benefit all the artists. So there's like a nice little ecosystem within that itself to help upstreams from the up.
So I mean, is the other thing that this kind of came out, what you were saying about opportunities, is for an artist nowadays, is it about, I'm trying to remember, is it a shark that has to keep moving or it dies? Is there any wildlife experts in the audience? I'm going to say a shark, and then we can change it in post-production to the right animal, or mammal, or fish, whichever it is. This idea of having to keep constantly in motion, constantly releasing music, constantly doing stuff, constantly on socials, is that going to become the pattern for artists, that they have to be constantly active? And is that something that we need to figure out how to manage without burning people out, without not giving them time to make the music and refine their craft?
Yeah, I think that pressure's been on artists for quite a long time. And for some of them it works, but then we've seen plenty of examples where the complete opposite has worked. Like with this band we worked with called Cigarettes After Sex, and they did amazingly well last year, just breaking all of those rules basically. Like didn't want to do anything on socials, wouldn't approve any content. It was all very simple and straightforward, but they just had a really strong kind of aesthetic, I guess. The music, the visuals, the live show, and one track just kind of got picked up and got a life of its own on YouTube, and it just fed out to the rest of the catalogue, and it's just kind of worked over the course of more than a year. So I think the systems that we're using are probably geared towards that regular release setup, but it's such a complicated system, I guess, that one little break somewhere can just kind of feed the rest of the system. Because for them it was one track, went kind of viral on YouTube a long time after it was released. It's got like 60 million views or something, and we can see the data where it just fed the rest of the catalogue and released a new album, and then that same model just transferred over to Spotify eventually, picked up from that. So I think the platforms are geared towards that, and there is pressure on artists to do that, but it's not the only way. Like I think that whole idea of I guess we can talk about storytelling later, but that whole idea of having a strong visual element, and that is really important as part of that as well.
To your point on things picking up a life of their own afterwards, I think that's a really important thing to recognise within streaming. when we talk about the years gone by, if you release something that didn't do well, they were scrapped and forgotten about. Now we're getting artists breaking in an incredible way, sometimes a year, 2 years after they've released things, and sometimes breaking in different territories, which then feed the rest of the world. So a track can be out for a very long time now before it actually gathers the momentum and leads to something else.
It's like the Alessia Cara thing, wasn't it? She got Best Grammys Newcomer, and people were being a bit sniffy about the fact that the track
Rag
came
and
out.
Bone Man as
Yeah.
well. He broke somewhere else after the tracks have been out a long time. So it's not all about that initial upfront success. And I think that's with the constant feeding of content. It's like there is no one size fits all. Like some artists absolutely rinse their fan base and it doesn't work. Then when they just don't, if you want to, you can oversell to your fan base, and they'll at some point they disconnect slightly. But you can also engage with them in smart ways, and there are so many options available now to an artist, and more than ever before, between social networks, all the data access points and streaming services, there are so many potential ways to interact with your fan base. I think it's finding the right way for your fan base, and we know as digital marketers, when we can see when fan bases stop engaging. And it's sort of in learning to be reactive, to that now and go, okay, we're hammering them. Actually, we should probably stop, or vice versa. The other way around. They want more. Can we give them more? How do we make all of this work?
Yeah, not enough artists are making use of their data and that whole segmentation of everything. Like Sammy's saying, there's a way that you can maintain that kind of momentum without putting all the pressure on the artist. If you use the data in the right way.
Also, the conversion. So, what the stuff that we have access to now, I mean, the really sophisticated tracking for purchase conversion, or to some degree. But if you implement the tools properly across all of your artists' properties, you can see what reacted, and did it result in a ticket buy? Did it result in a stream? You can actually see those results now, and then focus on what's doing well. But it is in how you read it.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, one of the things I've seen talked about at conferences recently quite a lot is this idea of, in this era of so much noise, so many songs, are people looking to discover music at all? Like, are people searching for music? Or are they leaning back, which we all are on sofas, or are they leaning forward? I guess coming to you, Luke, first, because you have stats, or Nielsen has stats about how music listening is going up. Is that correct? We're not listening to less music.
No, it's up 18% year on year. Okay. So it's a significant increase. And that could be around smart speakers, which we'll talk about later, which are increasing the use of music listening in new categories of people, so to speak. There's also the concept, again, around that, which is doing something with music, so cooking with music, driving with music. So music's seen as a secondary thing, which scares a record label senseless, I'm sure. But we're also seeing customers like Mixcloud, for example, who are working very focused on artists. They're actually going to be introducing artist-based subscriptions. So you'll subscribe to a DJ or an artist. So there is that mixture of people that are looking for new music, but also people that are interested in just very specific areas or genres.
That with music is interesting. I mean, I went to a conference a couple of weeks ago, and someone mentioned this idea of, I'm worried about it becoming with music, if it's gym with music. I was looking at Spotify's playlist recently. We had a chart of the top ones, and number 10 is Peaceful Piano. That's the 10th most, in terms of followers on Spotify, the 10th, because people are looking for something that's going to relax them.
Well, that's the big thing for the record labels, is being big in sleep, right? Because everyone needs to sleep, and finding music you can go to sleep to is a big part of
They
people's
do
business.
actually. When I did another event last week, and someone from a large record label was saying that they have having specific marketing meetings now, saying, "Shit, our streams have gone down from the sleep playlists. How do we up them?" I mean, the major labels, genuinely, they're earning a lot of money from them. Not just majors, the indies as well, but people are watching those and trying to find ways to up revenue and streams.
That's an A&R challenge, isn't it? Can we lose the drums and have a xylophone quite gently in the background and some panpipes? I mean, if we did a bit of playlist, if we move on to that, I mean, one of the things about playlists is when they're talked about a lot, our playlists are a worrying thing because people are becoming fans of playlists, not the bands on them, not discovering bands. And yet, when you were talking, Quentin, about the stuff you work on, if it's a dance label that I think is really cool, and I'm like, who is on their playlist? I want to find out who they are. In a way, playlists can be a lean forward thing where I respect. I kind of engage with it.
Spotify are touring playlists. I mean, that's just tell us something, perhaps, about that. They're taking playlists on tour.
Spotify is a bit of a, I guess it's a bit of a worry with Spotify, isn't it? Because they I think the artist and the music is always going to be secondary to the playlist brands, because they have to differentiate themselves from these massive companies that are kind of coming after them. You know, like Google, Apple, Amazon. Spotify needs kind of a unique selling point to kind of maintain its position, and I guess it's pitched that as these playlist brands that, you know, Discover Weekly, Release Radar, these things, these products that it has are what differentiates them from the other services. So I guess that's a bit of a worry for the music industry to some extent, although they're also working for them. But yeah, that seems to be the way that's going. But
And Quentin, where you described it, it's almost a more active thing for a label to say we're going to create our own playlist and maintain it and build an audience. So it's not just accepting that.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the thing you said, that people can become more fan of a playlist than of an artist, but I'm not sure if this is happening. I think it's more like playlists are just a easier way for people to find their favorite artist. And also I think a lot of artists have their own playlist, which can be followed by the fans. So yeah, I'm not really sure if this is happening.
so I guess we're talking about different sets of people as well. I mean, it's like it's not. I think music fans are always going to be music fans. They're always going to be curious and want to discover things. Whereas I think a lot of the users that are coming to Spotify are maybe people who would listen to the radio and now they listen to Spotify. So it's not necessarily everyone's just moving to this kind of lean back experience. I think it's more maybe music services are catering a lot more for people who are moving over from people who weren't necessarily people who went out and bought CDs and albums and things. They're people who just casually listen to the radio. So it might be a good thing in the long run, because it gets them onto services that are more music focused than maybe commercial radio or something.
Yeah. So it's the future of search and discovery, partly that you could be discovered in somewhere strange, like a sleep playlist or like a piano playlist that you don't expect. But then it's what you do next. Then how do you build on that? How do you try and make those casual listeners fans? I mean, that seems like a tough challenge, though. Like, I don't know how we're on Peaceful Piano Playlist, number 3, we're getting loads of streams, but how do we get those people to know who we are? I'm not sure is there an answer to that yet? Does anyone understand how you can capitalise on it?
I think Spotify is such a walled garden again. It's so difficult to do anything on the platform. But again, I think that's why it always comes back to like nothing's really changed. You still have to do all the other stuff. You still have to tour. You still have to have like a strong visual and brand, and you still have to do all the other stuff. And that's where the kind of connection happens. And I think everyone thinks too much about how can we do things on Spotify, whereas really Spotify's to some extent is the end point as well. We need to do things everywhere else, and people will come back to Spotify or Apple Music or whatever.
That makes sense. So you sort of picked up.
Yeah, I was thinking, like when you're in a playlist, you can also see the stats, like the geographics and the age, and so you probably, if you see like your music is popular in a certain country, you can do advertising on that. So I think it's an easy way to reach the people who are listening.
Yeah, and in reading the data, and also what type of subscription they have. Like, are they all students, or are they all on a family plan, or who they are? You can make informed marketing decisions based around the data that you're seeing, which then can amplify, hopefully, the streams that you're getting by targeting it at the right people.
I've got a vision of fly posters saying, as heard on acoustic coffee shop. But not, I'm sort of being slightly flippant, but maybe that's the thing. You sort of say, you've been heard in this city on this playlist, but maybe you need to jog people's memories and say, yeah, we were track 3 on
We see, I manage a band as well. Gold Key is a bloody brilliant band. But we saw last week or the week before, Deezer added them to a playlist, which we hadn't necessarily pitched into, in a playlist in France. And we instantly saw within that market them getting added to a load more different playlists, and also the fan base come through from the social. So we know they're an up and coming band, but we can see a direct correlation between a playlist ad and follow count. So I think a lot of the time, and it again goes back to what Tom was saying about it depends what the kind of person that is. If they're a genuine music fan, and you were just saying earlier, you've got played one song and you listen to it 3 times. I do that. If you find a song that you actually like, you do repeat play it, and then that makes the services clock you as a fan of that band anyway, when you play it a certain amount of times, and it'll clock you as an even bigger fan if you add it to library. So it's such a combination of different things. But at the moment, all of the services, I would argue, have a very limited amount of tools to directly be able to interact. Some are better than others. And what I would say, going back to Spotify, is, and we've used it to some success with things like they're touring their fan first initiatives, the top fan stuff. So sending pre-sale tickets out to people who genuinely listen to your music a lot, and the open rates on the emails are incredible. And of course they are, because they're fans of your band. So, but it'd be nice to see all of the servers offering that for a start, and not just people that know the services, like opening it up slightly more widely, so that artists can actually nurture those relationships, because that's only going to do us all good. If everyone's going to gigs and everyone's listening to music, we're all happy. So, it's forever a thing for me, trying to get the bloody live industry to work with the recorded industry a little bit more, and wherever the services sit within that. But I think we're seeing those modes of discovery are starting to join together. And again, to Tom's point, you do have to do all of those things still, but it's capitalising on it. As soon as you see there's a peak from somewhere, making sure you jump on it in an effective way.
Makes sense. It's interesting, we're talking about, like, maybe people aren't searching for music, and they might discover it, and it's what happens after that's going to be the thing. I mean, I knew this would happen. We haven't even got onto smart speakers, which is one of our subjects, but I think it's more important to open for questions. So does anyone have a question relating to what we said, or even a question saying, what about smart speakers then, which would help me out? But no, Alex at the back.
I can ask a smart speaker question if that helps.
Excellent. No, ask a question you'd like to ask.
No, that can work. I'm an artist manager myself, actually, so I'm trying to get my head around, is there some smart ways of tagging the music that we're putting up that will mean, in terms of natural searches on the voice searches for Alexa and HomePod and stuff like that, there's a better chance of that coming up on the hierarchy of music that's played, and I've got no idea how that would work. So do you guys know?
How do you come up when it's like, Alexa, play me some sleep music or some...
Yeah, so I did an article on this last week, specifically on the metadata. So all of the big labels at the moment, big majors and independents, are scrabbling to tag every track that they've ever released with the things that can be surfaced by voice command. That's happening at the moment. But also specifically, and something I cited in the article, if you're Dutch, you're not going to ask for music to cook to. You're going to do, is anyone Dutch in the room? How would you say that? But you would not ask it in English. So the tags, it has to be tagged in every language possible. God, in anything, the tone, the lyrical value, play me songs about sunshine, that needs lyrical content. And what we don't have at the moment, and when Spotify added songwriter data the other day, and Stu wrote an excellent article about this, it almost, I think in a way shamed the labels of how awful that data is. But there isn't a minimum viable submission process at the moment for any of those services where they're allowing you to include a massive wealth of data. And I think at the moment there has to be an effort between the labels, the distributors, the rights holders and the DSPs to be able to go, actually, do you know what? We need all of this data. We need all of it and more. You have to be able to... People could search now for music in any bloody way they want, in ways that we would not have comprehended 10 years ago when a lot of the digital tagging was done. So to the point of data, most of the smart labels that I know at the moment are deliberately spending time and effort and resource in putting, is this a minor key? Does that make it a sad song? Is it a song about, I don't know, teddy bears, whatever it might be? And all of those things that we've never had to submit before, but it's a process that the entire industry needs to do. And at the moment, there's a lot of buck passing. If you read any comment from the labels, they'll say it's the services. If you read it from the services, they'll say it's the publishers or the songwriters, or it's just someone accept some responsibility, and maybe we'll be all right.
It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because at the moment, the algorithm to tell you what 80s party music is, Amazon is writing that algorithm and that metadata.
Yeah, well, there's
not
the other
labels.
thing, the service thing as well. It's like,
yeah. Well, yeah, it's like we were saying earlier, wasn't it? This is another worrying kind of step. Not to be too negative, but it's like it was bad enough when you search in text on Spotify, and now they're kind of inserting their own playlists at the very top of search. When you search for an artist, you get a bunch of playlists from them. And now, when you move to search, when you move to voice search, there is only one result. That's it. So, yeah, who owns that? Where does that come from? It's inevitably probably going to be something controlled by the platform. So.
Out of interest, who has smart speakers in here? A couple of people. But who has Siri in their pocket? Yeah, same thing.
So
yeah, I guess it depends on the platform as to why they're producing the results they are. If you look at Amazon, for example, an Alexa customer spends 3 times as much as a non-Alexa customer. So it might be for Amazon you want to drive ticket sales. Now they're a ticketing company. If you've got a band touring at the time, then there's a way to they're interested in selling tickets, as an example. So, but then Google have got different reasons. Not sure what they are. Apple are focusing on just playing music. So the different platforms are taking different approach to the results they're giving based on certain queries.
It's also though an interesting thing. So like, I mean, Amazon's come bolting out. It's been a dark horse for years, and it's come absolutely bolting out, and they're here to be taken seriously. But an interesting thing from a hardware-software perspective is if someone is searching on Amazon on Alexa but using Spotify, they're both getting that data. So is Spotify search not also driving Amazon's learnings? And there's a lot of interesting things around who owns that relationship, and what will they do with that data.
I've got a vision of it becoming like SEO, where every song is meta tagged with 700 words, like sunshine, teddy bears.
I think it is going to be, honestly.
It's no coincidence that YouTube works so well, because they've had this for years, where you can put a whole load of information in there manually yourself, and that's I think still the biggest music discovery platform around.
Yeah, so it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's they've seen that for years, and it's also it's not just music, it's crossing things between music and other entertainment. So.
Good. Do we have another question from the audience? We have one down the front here. Is that 3 minutes or 3 more questions? 3 minutes. Okay.
Thanks. I'm Renee. I was wondering, we're talking a lot about algorithms and discovery. Whether, in the opinion of the panel, like the algorithms lead to musical tunnel vision, if you will, so makes it harder for new genres to pop up, and is there opinions on that?
Specifically, I can't remember if it was grime. I think there's some genre that finally got declared a genre a few weeks ago, and it was something really big. When I read it, I was like, how is that not a genre? So yes, I mean, to your point, but that's almost our constraints a little bit as a music industry, that new genres have always popped up, but in the machines perhaps being able to learn that is a new genre. And I mean, it was a whole other chat on AI and analysis of that, but there are new genres, and I think if you can't be pigeonholed into pre-existing boxes, perhaps.
If you're making something challenging and strange, then maybe the worry is you don't find your way through the algorithm to someone if you're making a new sound, which is kind of the thing we're all looking for, I suppose.
I think Spotify have obviously decided, among the others as well, that genres don't really matter anymore. It's moods and emotions rather than genres. I think that's maybe a bit of a music industry point of view. Like, we think about things in genres because we know about music, and we have this need to categorize things, whereas Spotify, they're looking at a mass market kind of consumer, and I think they think that people will have more connection with moods and genres, which in itself can probably be a bit damaging, because it just doesn't leave much space for things that are a bit weird and outside.
And the context, I mean, I think really as an industry, we're in the age of context around music. In any way you look at search and discovery, it's the context around it, whether that's moods or activities or whatever it might be.
Kind of interesting, I suppose, in the future, Alexa will know that I'm cooking in my kitchen, and it will know what I'm listening to, and maybe that will inform its algorithm for music to cook to.
Well, I was also in the article that I did. I said if I come home stressed from work and I've got a smart tracker on me, something monitoring my heart rate, and it says, I can tell you're stressed. I predicted that they will do this at some point, because I can tell you're stressed. Would you like me to play your relaxing playlist and open the wine cooler?
There's a presentation on this earlier, wasn't there?
Sorry,
Abby,
I missed that.
Yeah,
Yes.
Kind of,
Okay. Well, grand. Well, I think we're about to. So this is such a huge subject. I think we've sort of scratched the surface, and I hope there were some interesting things in there. We're all around, I think, tonight. I hope the next panel will pick up on some of these things. But thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward now to everyone scrambling to the bar and back here for the next quarter of an hour, I guess, is it?
Yes.